Let yourself drift into this idea. You wake up one morning and you've finally done it. Your routine is flawless. You rise before the sun. You meditate, journal, cold shower, 10 minutes of gratitude. You eat clean, lift heavy, hit inbox 0. You're reading another book this week, 24th this year. Your calendar is tight. Your vision board gleams. Your aura practically hums with optimization. You should feel unstoppable. You should feel proud. You should feel happy. And yet somewhere, just beneath the polished surface, there's a strange emptiness. A numb hum behind your eyes. A quiet sense that you're sprinting nowhere. You've upgraded your habits, your hustle, your habits about your hustle. But have you upgraded yourself? Because here's the paradox no one talks about. What if your obsession with becoming better is what's making you feel worse? What if the deeper you dive into self-improvement, the more disconnected you become from your actual self? What if all the productivity hacks, the wellness regimens, the life design philosophies are just sophisticated distractions? Beautifully branded ways to avoid the one thing you truly need to face, your own raw humanity. Have you noticed it? That beneath every goalpost, another one appears. That when you finally arrive, your joy vanishes like a mirage. That every improvement seems to bring a new, more subtle pressure, an invisible voice whispering, not enough, not yet, keep going. And you tell yourself it's discipline. That discomfort is a sign of growth. That live in this state of constant friction. But what if it's not growth you're feeling? What if it's the ache of exile? Exile from stillness. Exile from joy. Exile from the unquantifiable you buried beneath all the strategies, systems, and slogans. What if the culture of relentless improvement isn't a ladder to the best version of you, but a spiral drawing you further away from yourself? Who benefits from your exhaustion disguised as ambition? Who profits from your perfectionism packaged as self-care? Who feeds on your fear of being ordinary? And maybe the most important question, what part of you believes you're not worthy as you are? Because the pursuit of growth is not the problem. The problem is what's underneath the pursuit. Is it self-love or self-rejection wearing a motivational mask? Is it expansion or is it escape? Is it healing or is it hiding? You can meditate every morning and still be running. You can read 100 books a year and never learn a single truth. You can build a perfect life and still feel like an imposter inside it. So here's the real question. What happens when the desire to be better becomes the very thing that breaks you? What happens when your identity fuses with an image of who you should be, instead of honoring who you actually are? What happens when your self-worth becomes a scoreboard? When you turn every quiet moment into an opportunity to optimize? When even your healing becomes performative? Somewhere along the way, self-improvement stopped being about integration and became an arms race. A competitive, exhausting, commodified race to outgrow your pain as quickly as possible. To package yourself into something inspiring, palatable, profitable, but the soul doesn't move in straight lines. It doesn't care about your bio, your routines, your milestones. The soul wants depth, not upgrades. Wholeness, not hashtags. Presence, not performance. And until you see that, truly see it, you'll keep pushing harder, wondering why it never feels like enough. So, what is this shadow side of self-improvement? Where did it come from? Why is it so seductive? And most terrifyingly, what is it costing you to never arrive? Let's go deeper. Let's dig beneath the glossy surface, beneath the bullet journals and biohacks, and ask what no influencer ever will. Who are you trying to become? Why don't you think you already are? Because if self-improvement is the answer, you deserve to know what question it's really answering, or avoiding it. Let's peel back the first layer. Why would something designed to empower you, a journey to a better self, leave so many people secretly depleted, anxious, and alienated? Why does the modern path of self-optimization often feel like a treadmill, not a trail? What if it's because the engine of self-improvement isn't built on love, but on lack? Let's start with the roots. Centuries ago, the Western psyche began its rupture. Thinkers like Descartes split the soul from the body, the mind from the heart. I think, therefore I am a phrase that quietly dethroned being in favor of doing, of calculating, of proving. From there, modernity taught you. You are what you produce. Productivity became morality, busyness became virtue, identity became achievement, and then came the industrial age. Society turned people into cogs workers, consumers, numbers. The idea of intrinsic worth was slowly replaced with measurable output. That legacy hasn't disappeared. It simply evolved into something more polished. The self-help aisle is now $1 billion empire. But scratch beneath the surface, and it often echoes the same industrial logic. Become more efficient, upgrade, streamline, conquer your flaws, hack your biology, monetize your passions, turn every weakness into a weapon. Even your peace has to be productive. But here's the quiet danger. When you view yourself as a project, you begin to treat your humanity like a flaw in the system. You start optimizing not from curiosity, but from shame. And here is where we meet the hidden tyrant, the inner critic. In Jungian terms, this is the shadow self, the buried part of your psyche that houses all the traits you've exiled to survive in a world of performance. Every time you were told to be better, be tougher, be more successful, that shadow grew stronger. It is the part of you that believes you are not lovable unless you are impressive, the part that whispers, you are not enough unless you earn it. Psychologically, this dynamic is rooted in what Carl Rogers called conditions of worth. From a young age, we learn which behaviors gain us love, praise, belonging. We start shaping ourselves around those conditions and disown the rest. The result? We mistake adaptation for authenticity. We wear masks so long, we forget there was ever a face beneath them. Self-improvement without awareness becomes an extension of this early conditioning. You chase growth not to express yourself, but to escape yourself. You aim to heal not to integrate your wounds, but to erase the evidence they ever existed. You see this in phrases like I'm trying to become the best version of myself, but who decided what that version looks like? Was it you, or was it a collage of influencers, childhood approval patterns, unhealed trauma, and cultural marketing? Friedrich Nietzsche warned of this when he spoke of the slave morality, a system where people internalize external judgments and then punish themselves accordingly. In this model, self-improvement becomes a form of penance, a way to atone for your own imperfection. But what if your imperfection isn't the problem? What if your relentless striving is built on a false premise that you are broken? That premise is reinforced by a world that thrives on your dissatisfaction. If you truly felt whole, would you need another course, another app, another coach? Arthur Schopenhauer saw this cycle clearly. He described life as a pendulum swinging between pain and boredom. When you lack something, you suffer. But once you obtain it, the satisfaction fades, and you grow restless again. Is this not the arc of every self-improvement journey? You chase something because you believe it will complete you. You reach it, it doesn't. You set a new target, repeat, but you are not a machine. You are not an algorithm to optimize. You are a mystery, a contradiction, a being of emotion, intuition, flaws, longing, and grace. And any model of self-growth that ignores that, any path that demands perfection at the cost of presence is not growth, it is self-erasure. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, "Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself." But he meant this not as a motivational quote, but a burden, a radical responsibility. True growth demands more than rituals and routines. It demands radical honesty. It demands facing the parts of yourself that do not want to grow, lay to, be held. It demands making space for the parts that are scared, stuck, confused, or furious, and learning not to fix them, but to listen. But that's not what sells. What sells is transformation with a six-pack, healing that looks good on Instagram, empowerment that never questions the culture it came from. But there is another way, a slower, quieter, more courageous way. It begins when you stop asking, "How can I be better?" and start asking, "Who told me I wasn't enough in the first place?" Because until you confront that voice, you'll mistake your wound for your compass. You'll think your anxiety is ambition. Your burnout is discipline. Your shame is motivation. But they are not. They are smoke signals, signals from the parts of you begging to be remembered, not rebranded. The world will not slow down. The algorithms will not suddenly reward stillness. The culture will not clap for your surrender. But if you listen closely, you might hear something ancient and sacred stirring beneath the noise. Question far older than self-improvement. What if you are already whole, and the real journey is remembering how to live like it? The unseen consequences, it starts subtly. You read a book on morning routines. You optimize your calendar. You start journaling, meditating, meal prepping, cold plunging, fasting, and visualizing your future. Your days are scheduled down to the minute. You're tracking sleep, macros, dopamine spikes, and screen time. From the outside, you look like someone who has mastered life, but inside, you feel more fragmented than ever. Here lies the great irony. Self-improvement, when pursued without soul, fractures the very self it's meant to improve. Why? Because the more you view yourself as a task to be managed, the more you alienate yourself from your humanity. You don't grow, you dissociate, and in this dissociation, you begin to experience the silent consequences of a system you didn't even realize you were serving. Let's explore those. Shadows. 1. The perfectionist's prison. When you make constant improvement a moral imperative, you become terrified of stillness. Stillness starts to feel like death. You can no longer sit in silence without guilt. You can't rest without feeling lazy. You can't feel joy without questioning whether it was earned. Every moment becomes a scoreboard. Every emotion a performance review. This isn't growth, it's survival in disguise. In psychological terms, you become entrapped in toxic perfectionism. The belief that your worth is entirely dependent on meeting ever-rising standards. As research shows, this kind of mindset is closely linked to depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and burnout. But more than that, it's a theft. It steals your ability to be, to breathe, to feel, to fail without falling apart. 2. The commodification of the self. Modern self-improvement is inseparable from consumerism. You were taught to treat your personality like a startup, your relationships like negotiations, and your body like a product in development. You become your own marketing team, your own investor, your own competitor. You don't date, you vet. You don't rest, you recharge. You don't reflect, you optimize your mindset. But here's the psychological cost. Your identity becomes contingent. You no longer know who you are outside of your upgrades. This phenomenon, often referred to as self-objectification, occurs when you begin to see yourself from the outside in as something to be curated, evaluated, enhanced, and the tragedy. Even when you succeed, it doesn't feel like you succeeded. Because you've been role-playing a version of yourself so long, you've lost touch with what your own voice even sounds like. Point 3. The inner collapse of intimacy. Here's something rarely discussed in the hustle sphere. Relentless self-optimization often kills your ability to connect, because when your attention is always inward in your goals, your habits, your stats, other people become obstacles or accessories, not mirrors, not mysteries, not fellow travelers. You begin to see relationships through the lens of utility. Does this person help me grow? Do they align with my mission? Are they holding me back? But intimacy isn't built on utility. It's built on surrender, on shared imperfection, on being seen when you have nothing to prove. And if your identity is built entirely on performance, then you will never feel safe enough to stop performing, not even in love, not even with friends, not even with yourself. 4. The despair of the moving goalpost. Here's a psychological trap so insidious. Most don't notice it until they burn out. Success always moves. You reach your goal and you immediately feel empty. So you set another one, then another. You hit your dream salary and suddenly it's not enough. You lose the weight and now your skin isn't glowing enough. You meditate daily, but now you're not spiritual enough. This is what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill. The tendency for humans to quickly return to a baseline level of satisfaction. Regardless of external achievements, your brain normalizes every win. Every milestone becomes mundane. And so you live in a permanent state of almost there, but almost becomes your identity. And no matter how far you go, you're never home. 5. The spiritual bypass. Modern self-help often borrows language from spirituality, presence, awakening, transcendence, but it skips the sacred part, surrender. Instead of using spiritual insight to soften the ego, it uses it to strengthen it. Mindfulness becomes a productivity tool. Gratitude becomes a performance. Stillness becomes a way to manifest more instead of needing less. This is what Jung warned about when he spoke of inflation, the ego hijacking spiritual tools to avoid real transformation. Instead of descending into the messy depth of your being, you float on a cloud of affirmations, thinking you're healing when you're really hiding. 6. The culture of comparisons. Social media makes it worse. Now your self-improvement is public. You're not just meditating, you're sharing your meditation streak. You're not just reading, you're cataloging how many books you've read this year. You're not just growing, you're branding your growth. And because everything is visible, everything is competitive. You don't measure your progress by how you feel, but by how you look doing it. Psychologically, this taps into upward social comparison, the habit of comparing ourselves to those we perceive as doing better. But instead of inspiring you, it breeds resentment, discontent, shame. And ironically, the more you consume others' growth journeys, the more disconnected you feel from your own. So now the question becomes unavoidable. Is this really growth, or is it spiritual materialism wearing a wellness robe? Because the truth is, The more you try to fix yourself from a place of fear, the more fragmented you become. Your mind becomes a courtroom, your body becomes a battlefield, your life becomes a checklist, and one day you wake up with perfect abs, a six-figure job, 20 vision boards, and a soul that feels like a stranger, because you optimized everything, except your essence. But you're not beyond repair, because underneath all this, beneath the noise and the masks and the metrics, something inside you has always known. There's another way, not forward, not faster, not better, but deeper. And that's where we're going next. What if the opposite of self-improvement isn't stagnation, but self-remembering? Not climbing higher, but going inward. Not perfecting the image, but making peace with the original. Because maybe, just maybe, the way out of the endless loop of fixing, upgrading, and outperforming is not another goal, but a rebellion against the very idea that you are a problem to be solved. The modern world doesn't want you to pause. It fears your stillness, because stillness is where you begin to see, not what you should be, but what you already are. And that's dangerous to any system built on your perpetual dissatisfaction. So, how do you begin the rebellion? By rejecting the myth that more effort leads to more freedom. 1. Shift from mastery to mystery in the world of self-improvement. Knowledge is often seen as the final weapon. Read more, understand more, execute more, and you'll become more. But what if the most transformative truths can't be learned, only remembered? Carl Jung believed that true healing doesn't come from learning new concepts, it comes from integrating the unconscious parts of ourselves that we've long rejected. The shadow, the chaos, the irrational, the ugly. In other words, stop trying to master yourself like a machine. Start approaching yourself like a mystery to be honored. Ask not, how do I fix this part of me? But rather, why did this part of me emerge? What pain was it protecting me from? What wisdom is buried inside it? You break free not by conquering your shadow, but by inviting it home to trade optimization for integration. You've been trained to compartmentalize. Your productivity exists here, your emotions over there, your trauma in a journal, your body in the gym, your solif at all in a meditation app. But you are not a list of tasks. You are not a dashboard of metrics. You are not an algorithm to refine. You are a being, messy, contradictory, alive. Integration means this: you stop abandoning parts of yourself in the name of progress, the anger you tried to breathe away in meditation. It has something to say. The grief you tried to journal into gratitude. It holds a key. The laziness you tried to beat with discipline. It might be your soul's cry for rest. What if everything you've been trying to eliminate is actually part of your wholeness? 3. Redefine growth as depth, not height. You were taught to grow upward, visibility, achievement, validation. But trees don't begin that way. First, they go down, roots before branches, darkness before light. To rebel against self-improvement, redefine what growth even means. Not more skills, not better habits, not higher status, but deeper presence, being able to sit with your loneliness without numbing it, being able to tell the truth in a world obsessed with branding, being able to choose stillness in a culture addicted to motion. This kind of growth is invisible, but it's real, and it's rare, because it doesn't make you more valuable in the world's eyes. It makes you more human in your own. Point 4. Reclaim the sacredness of ordinary moments. You were trained to view life through the lens of milestones, promotion, transformation, completion, arrival. But life doesn't happen in highlights. It happens in the pause. Before you respond to a loved one, in the smell of rain on a tired afternoon, in the quiet ache of not knowing what's next, in the laughter that erupts when no one's performing. You want freedom. Begin by cherishing the in-between. Stop trying to turn every moment into proof of your progress. Start letting moments be whole without needing to be useful. The rebellion isn't flashy, it's humble, and that's what makes it powerful. 5. Unlearn the myth of constant self-monitoring. Neurologically, constantly tracking yourself, your steps, your hours, your thoughts activates the brain's default mode network, which is associated with self-referential rumination and anxiety. Translation: obsessing over your progress can literally make you miserable. So here's a radical act. Stop watching yourself. Take a walk without counting steps. Write without thinking of your brand. Speak without worrying how it sounds. Dance like nobody's measuring your heart rate. You are not a project. You are a presence. Your worth doesn't live in your reflection. It lives in your aliveness.6. Rebuild relationships around shared humanity, not shared goals. Many modern friendships are built on shared productivity. Gym buddies, mastermind groups, accountability partners. But what if you built relationships around shared vulnerability instead? Not how can we help each other grow, but can we sit together in the places we haven't grown yet? Revel by showing up as your unfinished self. Revel by loving others in their rawness, not just their ambition. Revel by refusing to make every conversation about becoming better and, instead, make space for becoming truer. You don't need a tribe that helps you ascend. You need one that helps you return. 7. Choose silence over noise. Here's the final weapon in your rebellion. Silence. Because in silence, the voices of the world fade. The metrics disappear. The shoulds and musts dissolve. And what remains is you, unfiltered, unoptimized, unevolved, maybe trembling, maybe tired, but real. And in that silence, you'll hear something else. The sound of your soul whispering, "Welcome back." Self-improvement taught you to escape yourself. Rebellion teaches you to come home, not by doing more, but by becoming less, afraid of who you already are. So don't just improve. Remember, integrate, reclaim, because on the other side of the performance is a self you've never had to earn, a self that's been waiting, a self that's already whole. Close your eyes and see this. You are standing in front of a mirror, not a sleek, modern mirror, but something ancient, a surface so still it feels alive. You stare on what stares back isn't your face. It's your essence, not your age, your goals, your habits, or your brand, but a flicker, a pulse, something older than your story. And suddenly, it speaks not with words, but with presence. You were never meant to be improved. You were meant to be met. Can you feel the difference? The entire structure of modern self-improvement rests on one silent lie, that you are not enough, that you are a problem, a puzzle, a rough draft in need of polish. But what if that's not true? What if the deepest transformation doesn't come from changing yourself, but from seeing yourself without the lens of inadequacy? What if the most powerful act of growth is to stop growing? The illusion of a final self. You've been chasing a phantom, an ideal version of you that never fully arrives. Every book read, every routine followed, every lesson learned only seems to move the goalpost further. Why? Because the perfect self you're striving to become is a mirage composite of cultural expectations, internalized shame, and filtered images of others, curated lives. You think you're becoming your best self, but you're really just running from your true self, the one that was never meant to be liked, ranked, or improved. The paradox. You cannot become whole by disowning the parts of you that don't fit the mold of perfection. The body knows the truth. Your mind may be fluent in ambition, but your body, your nervous system, your breath, your gut, it knows. It knows when your progress is performative. It knows when you're pushing past exhaustion for applause. It knows when your self-discipline is really self-abandonment in disguise. No matter how sophisticated your routines, your body will whisper, "This isn't safety. This isn't peace. This isn't home." So what's the truth your body's been trying to tell you? That love doesn't come at the end of a checklist. That worth is not the prize of discipline. It's the starting point of being. That your deepest healing happens not when you add more, but when you strip away everything that taught you to distrust yourself. Wholeness is not earned. It's remembered. Viktor Frankl wrote that man's search is not for pleasure or power but for meaning. But you can't manufacture meaning through metrics. Real meaning is felt, not achieved. It arises when you drop the performance and encounter yourself in your full, messy truth. You don't find meaning by becoming impressive. You find meaning by becoming honest. And from that honesty emerges something sacred, a sense that your pain has purpose, that your flaws are not errors, they're archetypes, that your shadow is not your enemy, it's your inheritance. The real you has no name here is the final, most liberating realization. The self you've been trying to improve doesn't exist. It's a construct, a costume, a concept stitched together by memory and expectation. The real you, the one beneath the noise, has no name. It's the you that was here before anyone told you who you should be. The you that laughed before it was strategic. The you that cried before it was shameful. The you that felt before it was filtered. You cannot improve that self. You can only return to it. The end of the ladder. Imagine you're climbing a ladder. Higher and higher. Each rung a new improvement. And then something inside you stops. Not because you're weak, but because you remember. You remember that you didn't come here to climb. You came here to touch the ground, to smell the earth, to feel your heartbeat, to sit beneath the tree rather than try to become one. You step off the ladder. The world shouts at you to keep climbing, but something deeper says, "No, this is enough. I am enough." And in that stillness, something miraculous happens. You arrive, not at a destination, not at a trophy, but at yourself, unfiltered, undeniable, unimproved, a poetic ending, the flame beneath. The ash you are not a self to be improved. You are a flame buried beneath the ash of expectation. You are a river beneath the dam of conditioning. You are a forest beneath the concrete of performance. You are not broken. You are buried, and now you are rising, not as a better version, but as a truer one. So let the ashes fall. Let the concrete crack. Let the dam break. Return to what you were before they taught you how to be. Return to the truth that was never lost, only hidden, that you are not a task. You are a soul, not a project, a presence, not a draft, a divine, breathing paradox, and your wholeness. It doesn't begin at the finish line. It begins here, in this breath, this body, this messy, beautiful moment where nothing is lacking and everything is already whole.